Hey, Ohio, welcome once again to the Retirement Blueprint Show with Tim Lofton of Axum Planning and Wealth. I'm your host, Spike Spangle, and every single week we try to help you with retirement income solutions. Mr. Tim Lofton, what's on your mind this week?
Well, interestingly enough, Spike, there is a record number of people turning 65.
In fact, we shared this article. I think we talked about it on WHIO on your radio program. We're calling it Peak 65. It is the most amount of Americans turning 65 in U.S. history coming up in the next 5 to 6 years. And what does that mean? What does that mean to you? What does that mean to the facilities and locations that take on retirees? Massive economic implications. So let's talk about what it means for our communities right here in Ohio. You ready to jump in, Tim?
I am. So 4.1 million people are turning 65 every year between now and 2027.
That's going to be a lot of birthday parties at our local restaurants.
It's a lot of birthday parties.
And I start to think then about the kind of the trickle-down effect of so many people turning 65. Mm-hmm. How many people would be going into long-term care facilities? Do we have enough? You know, supply, demand. When the supply goes down and the demand goes up, it increases prices. So immediately when I hear of Peak 65, I start to think, are you talking to people about long-term care and long-term care planning?
Well, of course. I mean, we've been talking about long-term care planning for over 30 years. You know, it's becoming more real. When you start to look at the number of people that could potentially need long-term care, and listen, nobody likes to talk about nursing homes. It's a coin flip. I mean, it's about a 50 to 60% chance that a married couple, one of you spends time in a nursing home. But if you do, if that ends up being you, Spike, that can absolutely decimate somebody's nest egg.
Right, right. And again, this also leads to what we call kind of a transfer of wealth.
Correct.
With this many people turning 65, I mean, they're going to spend down some of those assets, could be on things like long-term care, but there's also the passing of that wealth through the generations. So I'm kind of curious, do you think more of it will be spent through health care needs in retirement, or do you think we'll be able to hold on to it and start passing some of this wealth to Gen X, Gen Y, maybe even the millennials?
even the millennials. You know, I think that both of those things are going to happen. I think we're going to see a massive transfer of wealth over the next 20 years. I also think that there is going to be people that get caught in the middle of this long-term care issue where they didn't necessarily do the planning, they don't have the extra income, and they're going to have to spend down those assets. And you know, one of the reasons why we're talking about this on the show is so much of this can be planned around. Putting together a estate plan and retirement plan that incorporate things like long-term care. If that is a concern for you, if that's something you're worried about, maybe you went through this with your parents or grandparents, or you saw a family friend that has gone through this and you saw what can happen, make it a priority. I understand it's hard, even at 60, to have this conversation, because you're like, that's probably 30 years off. But that means we have 30 years to plan for it, 30 years to come up with a solution that makes sure that you keep all that you made and that you can pass it on to the ones you love, not a nursing home.
It's hard sometimes to even think about these numbers. We've talked many times about the national debt, 34 trillion, maybe 35 by the end of this show. It's almost every 100 days or so, it's added another trillion to what's going on. Let's look at this in a more positive way. You said something about how many assets are actually held in the United States, from real estate to investments. How much total? How many dollars and cents?
About $156 trillion are held in assets, with about half of those belonging to the baby boomers.
Okay, and then about half of those assets, a little more than that actually, I think you said, was in real estate.
Yeah.
Okay, so the real estate homes, these are our homes, the homes that we've paid off. If we're doing estate planning for our family, how efficient is the transfer of real estate to our kids, to the grandkids, as opposed to assets, investments, tools like that?
Well, the question is, do the kids want it? I mean, that's, you know, we have in Ohio, there's a lot of farmland, a lot of farmers that own farmland, sometimes first, second, third generation. But the problem is when they look at the kids may say, Mom, Dad, we don't want the farm. Or maybe one of the three kids wants the farm, and then how do I split things up equally if I'm giving the one largest asset to one person? So there's a lot of planning that goes into figuring out things like this and making sure you're asking the right questions. Check with your kids, have a conversation with your kids. Do they want the family home? Do they want the lake house? Do they want that condo in Florida? Is that something they're interested in? Because if it's not, and you go all these years with thinking, hey, I'm going to pass this on and the kids are going to use it, but they're not going to use it, don't you want to know that now? I mean,
let me start with a simple one, because
Sure.
you can't split the baby in half.
No.
You got two kids
Right.
and a house.
Right.
How do you split that? I mean, because you either have to sell the house and then both kids get the proceeds, but what if somebody wants to remain in the family house? How do you split that up?
Well, it's a matter of equalizing the assets, right? And so let's say that they have a family home that's worth $500,000. There's a total assets of $1 million. You may end up giving $500,000, half of the assets in real estate, to one of your kids. The other one may end up with the investments. A lot of times the kids do not want the family home. That's not something they're interested in. Now, when you start talking about like a lake home or a vacation home somewhere where they've kind of grown up with it, there is a desire maybe to keep that in the family. And I've seen that work out really well with a lot of our clients where, there's three kids, they all have ownership, 1/3 ownership of the lake house. They take turns, they do group family things, they come out individually, and I've seen that work really, really well. The problem is that if you have one or more kids that just have no interest, you can't really write them out because they're not interested in what you have. I guess you can. It's your money.
It's your choice, yeah.
But
part of why you talk about estate planning is to hopefully try to keep the family together. It's
Right.
those arguments that you won't be able to help.
And
later
make
on.
sure that vacation home is there to pass on. That it's not having to be sold to pay for a nursing home.
Right. And so there's the home aspect of it. Then there's all the other investments and assets, and sometimes those have to help with the taxes. I'm wondering, though, is the home a more tax-efficient way to be able to pass on these assets? Because whoever receives that will be able to get that step up in basis.
Right.
With the investments, those are usually in an account, a 401k or an IRA, and there's time limits on how quickly you have to start taking that money out.
There is, and with the change that they made a couple years ago with the laws, IRA assets, if they're passing to someone other than a spouse, have to actually come out of that plan within 10 years, which means mandatory taxation on that money. And we have to factor that into the plan, Spike, because if you think about if somebody's getting a $500,000 asset with a step up in basis, they're not paying any taxes on it. Someone else is getting $500,000 of an IRA that's worth $410,000, $400,000. They're out $100,000 there. And, so depending on how important the equalization is to mom and dad when they pass on, that all dictates the plan. But it starts with having a plan, having these discussions around our conference table and saying, what do you want to have happen? What do the kids want to have happen? And then drawing a map to get us there.
Right, and that's what we want to say to folks right now. We know that there's many of you who've been watching the show for the last couple of years. Maybe you've heard Tim on the radio program. The time to act is right now. Peak 65. More of you Americans are turning 65 in the next few years. We want to make sure that you've got plans in place to take care of yourself and your family. This might mean estate planning. This might mean making sure that we've got an income plan, but it all starts with a phone call. There is no cost to you. So claim your spot right now. Call that phone number down on the bottom of the screen. We'll be back with more of the Retirement Blueprint Show with Tim Lofton right after this.
My most rewarding moment for helping clients is seeing the fear of the unknown disappear from their face. Some people are worried about a potential nursing home stay. Some, it's market volatility and losing their money in their investment. Some are just genuinely concerned about the direction of the economy. But for the most part, the whole taking away of fear and concern starts with having a plan. Not something off the shelf, but something customized to that family, where we can sit down and get to know them intimately, to understand what their hopes and dreams are. What do they want to have happen after they're gone? And make sure that those things happen. The retirement blueprint is exactly that. It's a blueprint for retirement. It's built off of the 5 cornerstones of retirement planning. That's developing an income plan, creating a tax plan, an estate plan, a long-term care and health care plan, and of course, the investment plan. And the best part is we have a team of people to come alongside to do all of those things that have the credentials and the expertise and the years of experience to make sure that everyone is coming together to create the best plan. It takes those worries out of their head and puts solutions down on paper.
Welcome back. We're talking about your retirement planning with Tim Lofton of Axum Planning and Wealth. I'm your host, Spike Spangle. We were just talking about Peak 65. Here in the United States, more people will be turning 65 over the next 5 years than at any time in U.S. history. We're living longer and healthier than we ever have. We were just talking a bit about the estate planning and the transfer of wealth and how that may or may not happen. It won't happen if you don't have a plan. Second part of it, though, is one of the disturbing numbers I saw was the median average in retirement savings, Tim, is about $200,000.
Right.
Now, that ain't going to do it. That ain't going to help you be retired. But what I was curious about there, though, was what was the age? You know, I mean, does that include everybody? And more so, can we do something about it? I mean, can we catch up if it's late?
Yeah, and listen, if you're a person that's looking at your retirement savings and you're like, oh my gosh, like, I'm not going to make it. There's good news. You can still make it. There is so much opportunity today inside of retirement planning to be able to do things like a catch-up, where the IRS has actually said for all the mere mortals under the age of 50, you can only put in this much, but over age 50, you get to put a lot more money away. So knowing that I can maybe dig myself out of a hole that I feel like I'm in, I think is very encouraging, because we can absolutely save our way to where we need to be. The question is, how much do I need to be saving? What is the amount I need to be putting away on a monthly basis to get me to my goal? That's the problem. That's what I worry about, is that folks just have a magic number in their head that if I have this, I'm going to be okay, without actually doing the math behind it to see, am I going to be okay? Sitting down with us and saying, all right, here's what I have. Is this enough? And if it's not, having a plan to get us there.
You know what baffles me? I was listening to you, but I was thinking of something while you were talking. Why is there a limitation on what we can put in at all? I understand with a tax-deferred 401k, because, I mean, of course, you're going to have to live on something, and that's going to be decided by the person. But with a Roth 401k, if I'm paying my taxes on that money every year, and if I chose to put in 50% of my own income, what's the problem there? Why is there any limitation at all on what I can save?
You answered that question before we went to break. What was the national deficit number?
No.
Right?
35 trillion.
35 trillion.
Right now. Yeah.
The government is desperate for funds.
I
right now,
hear
for
you, but
tax
what
funds.
if it's the Roth? What if I'm paying my tax that year?
I understand you're paying your tax that year, but I'm creating tax-free growth that is costing the government money forever. So I get a shot in the arm today, but I'm giving up future tax revenue. I agree with you, and I think, you know, most Americans would say, hey, what does it matter? It's my money. I pay taxes on it.
I paid my tax on it one way.
But we have a scenario today where there is not even close to enough tax revenue to cover our spend. That's how we got here, right?
Okay.
So the idea that the government's going to give that up, now they're never going to come out and say that, but I mean that's the fact. It's not the shot in the arm of tax revenue today. It's that future taxation on that money forever.
Okay, and now they've been talking about putting other kinds of tools inside there. When I say tools, I'm going to go ahead and say it for you, Tim. An annuity, possibly putting an annuity in there. I mean, that's exactly what you do when your account turns into a pension for those companies that still provide that. They give it to an annuity organization, and then you get that payout for the rest of your life. Do you find that would this be a great tool, or an exciting tool, or a difficult to use tool if you want to go from job to job? How do you feel about an annuity inside a retirement plan?
I like the idea of it in some instances, and I think that it absolutely is a fit. My concern is, as I look at the 401k industry and I see what they put in there, I don't have any say in that, right? As an employee, as somebody who would maybe be advising on that, they're not necessarily going to put in the right annuity. That would be my only worry, but I understand it. Listen, $385 billion last year went into annuities. Why? Because we no longer live in the pension generation. We now live in the 401k generation. We are responsible. You're responsible. You that are watching the show, your job now is to figure out retirement. It's not our grandparents' retirement anymore, where you work someplace for 30 years, you retire, you get your watch, and you get a check in your mailbox every month. Those days are gone. Now we have to take control. And in doing so, where's the information? How as an American am I supposed to just magically know how much to save? What investments to choose? Do I do the 60-40 thing? I've heard a lot about that. Or maybe one of these time-dated funds. And what does that mean? And then which one do I pick? We don't have that information. I mean, for all intents and purposes, it's like pensions went away and they said, America, here's your 401k, wing it.
Yeah, good luck.
Good luck.
We'll hopefully maybe see you on the other side. And they're starting to figure that out. This savings has all been put on us. And call it that 401k generation. Mm-hmm. And I'll answer your question. Say, why is all this happening? I go back to peak 65. There are more people turning 65 today. And I just feel that the pressure that we're going to start to feel on things like our hospitals and our long-term care facilities, anything that is going to be care-related like that, even entertainment-related, if we don't start building more infrastructure to start taking care of our 65-year-olds, which eventually will be us, I think all of that money is actually going to be spent on the care, and it's going to be transferred into healthcare instead of being able to transfer down to our families. This is why we're talking about this, because we want to make sure that you are doing your estate planning, right? Mm-hmm. Now, where does that fit in with the retirement blueprint?
Well, the estate planning is one part of the retirement blueprint, and I think a very important part, and one that's often missed. We all know kind of what we want to have happen if something happens to us, right? I know that if something happens to me, my money and everything is supposed to go to my wife, and then if something happened to both of us, then it's supposed to go to my kids. But if I don't put that in writing, Spike, if I'm not intentional about making sure that what I want to have happen goes down on paper, it doesn't happen. And what I do is I open myself up to having to go through probate, creating a bunch of problems, paying a bunch of extra expenses unnecessarily. And worse, when you start talking about long-term care and some of these other things, those are specialty pieces inside of the estate plan that take careful attention. You have to make choices. And I think a lot of times we kind of kick that can down the road, even at 60, 65, and say, oh, you know, that's 20 years from now, I'll get around to it. I can't tell you how many people have come into the office, and listen, if this is you, I'm not giving you a hard time, you're in great company. But how many people come into the office, do you have a will? Yes, I have a will. But it was done when my kids were born. How old are your kids? 42. You know, I mean, yeah. That's the issue is we've got to update these things. We've got to get current. If you're getting ready to turn 65, now is your time, right? It's take control of your retirement, take control of your estate plan, get these things buttoned up.
Right, you can do that right now, folks. Call the phone number down on the bottom of the screen. We have people who are standing by right now. We mean that. You call that phone number, you'll hear somebody right now. You can keep watching the show and we'll still be right here because it's not going to come here to the studio. You're going to call this phone number. We're going to get you started on your own retirement blueprint, your own income plan, your own tax plan, and estate plan for retirement. There is no cost to that. The only cost is a few moments for you to pick up the phone and then come on into the office. You can meet with Tim and his team from Axum Planning and Wealth. He is the creator of the retirement blueprint. Call and get your own. No cost to you. We'll be back with more Tim Lofton right after this.
It goes back actually when I was 11 years old. That was the first time I discovered what not having money felt like. I remember being in Sunday school class, and one of the parents came in to let us know that the ski trip, which was kind of a rite of passage at 12, was coming up. And so I got my permission slip, and class got out, and I was that kid. I was like running through the church and up the stairs and weaving in and out of people, and got into the sanctuary, and I looked at the very back of the sanctuary, and I saw my mom, and she was there with 2 or 3 other ladies, and they were talking. And I took off at a dead sprint, and I'm waving this piece of paper and talking a mile a minute, and I get to her, and she's like, "Wait, honey, what is it that you're saying?" And I said, "Mom," I said, "I can go. Like, I'm gonna be 12, I can go." And she's like, go to what? I'm like, the ski trip, the youth group ski trip. And I'll never forget it. She got down on one knee, and she wrapped her arms around me, and she said, "Baby," she said, we can't afford that this year." And it wasn't the disappointment of not being able to go on the trip. It was the look in her eyes that she couldn't afford it and that she couldn't do that for me. And I really think that that put me on the path of having a heart for helping people get to retirement, to be able to stay retired and to live their best life. And that all starts with advice. And that's what I chose to do for a living.
Welcome back to the Retirement Blueprint Show with Tim Lofton of Axon Planning and Wealth. I'm your host, Spike Spangle, and we're talking today about Peak 65. More Americans today are turning 65 than ever before, but since I know it's up on the screen right now, I know you're scrolling around with your phones and so forth. When you see that QR code down on the bottom of the screen there, you can open your phone to the camera function and point it at that black and white box down there. That's going to take you over to the website, and you can claim your own appointment right there. No cost to you. So either call the phone number, use the QR code. You're all accustomed to using them. You've been in restaurants where you've had to go in and use that QR code, and you see the whole menu. We're not going to make you scroll that much. When you click on that QR code, it'll take you right to the website, and you'll see Claim My Appointment right there on the top.
Spike, COVID did 2 things. It made everyone know how to use Zoom and how to use a QR code, right? And we went into a restaurant and there was no menus anymore. It's like...
I can remember the first Zoom party with my family.
Right.
And the leaning in of, I'm not going to say the names, but like, you know, this one, it was right underneath their chin. It's like, no, you're too close. You're too close.
I wouldn't do the QR menu at Cheesecake Factory because it takes up too much space.
Yeah.
But I can't get over their menu.
But I do think, to go back to it, because you mentioned a number, something about 360 or
385
billion. Yeah. And I think it was 311 billion the year before. 2 years in a row, LIMRA reported more money poured into annuities. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm trying to figure out the cause effect. Is this because of Peak 65? We took our investments and said, I don't want to manage this stuff, and so now I want this automatic income stream? Or is it because of the fear of volatility of future markets? What do you think happened?
I think it's absolutely both.
Thanks.
How about that? I mean, I can't go wrong with that answer. When you look at the Peak 65, what is the driver there? When people retire, what is the number one thing they're concerned about?
I would say probably not running out of the money.
Not running out of money. So income. Income is the driver. Annuities are one of those products that if you get the right one, offer lifetime income and sometimes joint lifetime income. This is how people are bridging that gap from the pension generation to the 401k generation. They're essentially creating their own pension plan utilizing part of their dollars in an annuity. This comes down to giving jobs to your money. And we talk about that a lot on the radio show and on the TV show, that it's not about asset allocation, a 60-40 split, or any of these buzzwords that we've kind of grown up hearing when it comes to retirement investing. What we're looking at here is, what does the money need to do? We're not putting it all in one thing and then just taking a withdrawal to live on. No, we have to be intentional about it. So if the job of the money is to create income, by definition, I can't take risk. I don't want volatility. I know that the income has to go forever, and it has to make sure that if something happens to be, my spouse is going to have that income. Once I've done that, I have a combination of that and my Social Security, then that leaves the leftover, what we call the extra bucket. Now that extra bucket can be 100% in growth. Not what we would normally say is like, oh, well, that extra bucket needs to be, diversified. Well, it doesn't, because we've already taken away the volatility and risk of the one thing we're worried about, income, and that income changing. So once we get to that growth bucket, we can take as much risk as we want.
Yeah, and here's the thing. If you take $500,000, whatever sum you have, you can run out of that. If you divide that out, start taking that out monthly on your own. If you live to 105, you'll run out of that, right? Let's say we're taking out $3,000 or $4,000 a month. It is finite. But if you put it into an annuity contract, if you go with an A-rated company, even if you run out of that principal, they will continue to pay you. I'm not a fan. I'm not a not fan of annuities. It's a tool.
It's a tool.
So we just say, what portion of our money do we want to make sure we never run out of? What do we want to keep liquid? What do we want to keep growing? And you divide it out. It's not an all or nothing, is it?
No. And when you give jobs to your money, it is a completely different approach, because I'm not defining how much needs to go into the annuity. I'm defining how much income I need. The income tells me how much I have to put into the annuity. The only risk that we have, the reason why, we've talked about that 4% withdrawal rule, the reason that that potentially doesn't work is exactly that. If the value goes down because of markets, or, the market's moving sideways for 10 years, I could run out of money. This allows me to make sure that doesn't happen.
Right. Are there fees involved? Sure. Are there costs? Are there, could you maybe have...
Are there good ones and bad ones?
Yeah, but it's the same thing in the markets. And the difference in the markets is that when you're withdrawing from that money, when the market goes down, it's a lot like a double loss.
It is.
Because if the market's gone down 10% and you take out your $2,000 you need that month, you've lost that along with the loss that's in there. And if it's a tax-deferred account, your taxes that you have to pay.
And you look at 2008, it makes recovery... Not that it didn't happen, it did recover, but it makes recovery so much more difficult because I'm taking out and it's down, and I'm taking more out because I'm having to sell more shares because they're worth less.
With more Americans turning 65 at peak 65, this means more Americans today need the retirement blueprint, don't they?
100%.
All right. Folks, you can call the phone number you see right here to get started on your own retirement blueprint with Tim Lofton. There is no cost to it. You need to call the phone number, goes over to our secure call center, and we'll set up an appointment for you. You'll meet the entire team along with Tim. Now, I know some folks don't like to pick up their phone to call anybody. You don't want to be followed around on that and have somebody calling you back. Don't worry, we don't do that. But if you want to do this privately on your own, open up your phone to the camera function then. Click on that QR code down there. It'll take you over to the website. You can schedule your own appointment. Either way, get started on your own retirement blueprint. There's no cost to you. Thanks so much for watching. Tim and I will both be back next week.